The modern world today wants you to believe that happiness and fulfillment comes from all these material possessions and outside events. Once you finally get that new house, you'll be happy. Once you get that new car, that's when you'll be happy. Once you get that $1 million net worth, the new Rolex, the promotion, etc., is when you'll finally be happy. Look, there's a time and place for all these things. Like, obviously, it's nice to have nice things, whatever you want to say, but the Stoics understood that these things can never actually lead to true happiness. And I really think this is why we are more depressed than ever before. People don't realize that all these material possessions don't actually bring them true happiness or fulfillment, whatever you want to say. So when they go out chasing all these things, expecting them to get happy, and then they don't, they just become more depressed than ever. And then they just move on to the next shiny new thing. And then we just keep going around this hamster wheel of materialism, always chasing the new, bigger, newer, like better thing. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor who lived nearly 2,000 years ago, from the years 121 to 180 AD. At the time, you could easily argue that he was the most powerful man on the earth, especially since he became Roman emperor pretty much at the peak of its power. He could have had literally anything he wanted in his nearly 20 years as the Roman emperor and the most powerful man on the earth. He wasn't bound by money, laws, anything like that. He could have anything he wanted. He obviously had infinite amount of money, if you could say that. He could have women. Obviously, there were no cars, the fastest horse, whatever you want to say. He could have endless parties, alcohol, all the nicest foods, all of that stuff. And yet he didn't indulge in any of that stuff. He advocated for a life of virtue, just a simple life, living in accordance with nature and practicing self-discipline above all these material possessions. And if there's one person who could get you to believe that material possessions do not equal happiness, it would literally be Marcus Aurelius, because he could have anything he wanted. It's one thing for me, a broke 20-year-old kid, telling you no, don't go chasing after a lamb or anything like that. But if Marcus Aurelius didn't value all these material possessions, why should you? You're just making yourself miserable chasing all these material possessions instead of looking inwards for happiness like all these Stoics believed. And if you haven't, I would highly recommend reading Marcus Aurelius' book, if you can even call it that. It was more just like a private journal to himself that just so happens to get carried throughout history until we can read it today. It's literally one of a kind. It's a great book. He really talks about all this stuff in more detail and just puts it really beautifully, if you can say that. So I would highly recommend it. It's not even that long. It's called Meditation, so you can look it up. But just try to put yourself in his shoes. What would you do if you could literally have anything, do anything you wanted? You decided the laws, you had endless amounts of money, anything like that. Pretty much everyone, like 99% of people, would just dopamine max like crazy. They would party every single day, eat the most expensive food, take drugs, buy all the cars, all the houses, all the yachts, whatever you can spend money on. But the question is if it would actually lead to happiness. And I think, and the Stoics probably would agree as well, that it would just lead to the opposite, misery. I know this is gonna sound crazy, but in the end, it's actually a lot like drugs. When you start out taking them, obviously it feels great. You get a ton of dopamine. You feel like you're on top of the world. But by every time you actually take it, you get less and less of a high until you're actually below your baseline happiness. And you actually have to take the drug just to get up to baseline again. It's why you see all these famous rich people doing all this stupid shit, like going to a freaking Epstein Island and doing a bunch of crazy stuff. It's literally because they've bought everything, they've tried everything, they're miserable, they're just looking for the next high, and then they end up doing stupid shit like that. Because they're miserable, they don't have anything left to do, really. It's exactly like how GTA becomes boring once you get that hacker money drop and all that stuff. You get everything, you buy all the cars, all the houses, there's nothing left to do. You just sit there and the game is not even fun anymore. And this is what all the other Roman emperors did. They just indulged in parties, women, drinking alcohol, and in the end they became miserable and the Roman Empire fell. Another analogy is just, it's like when you're a kid and you want that toy, you've had your eyes on it for a while. Then when you finally get it for Christmas, you rip open that present, you get tons of dopamine, you feel like you're on top of the world, you're gonna be happy for the rest of your life. You play with it for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, but in the end it just ends up sitting in the corner of your room collecting dust and now you got your eyes on a new shiny object. The secret of happiness, you see, is not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less. Socrates. So instead of actually just chasing all these material possessions, it's better to start developing the capacity to just, look inwards and just enjoy what you already have. Learn to just enjoy the little things, going for a walk, looking at the nice nature, listening to the birds sing, watching the sunrise, sunset, the beautiful stars in the night sky, spending time with friends and family. All these simple things is what is actually gonna bring you happiness and fulfillment, not all these material possessions. All the best things in life are free, always remember that. It's really about just learning to enjoy the present moment and all these little things instead of always looking towards the future, all these things that you want, or dwelling on the past and being anxious about all that stuff. That is just what most people do. They just totally forget about all the things that they have right now that they can be so grateful for, because society tells them that they need to be worried about getting the new iPhone or that new smart TV or the car or the house or anything like that. They become so focused on these things that they literally miss the forest for the trees, or however you say that phrase, whatever you want to say. I know this is gonna sound cringe, but everyone is literally trapped in the matrix, always chasing the next material possession, because guess what? That is what society tells us, because that's how they make money. They convince us to buy all this shit we don't actually need. And the unfortunate truth is just that is how the world runs today. If the GDP goes up by 3%, everything is well and good, the world is prosperous, everyone is happy, and all is good. But in reality, that just couldn't be further from the truth. We are more depressed than ever before, we're more divorced than ever before, we have less friends than ever before, we are fatter, sicker, more unhealthy than ever before, despite having more things than we've ever had before. And look, I ain't saying that you have to go full monk mode, sell all your stuff, move to the mountains and just meditate for 16 hours a day. But I think we all can just benefit from keeping these stoic beliefs in the back of our minds, just throughout our daily life, and when we start chasing all these material possessions. And just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with wanting to become rich, I want that as well, but it's about wanting it for the right reason. Obviously, I don't have the freaking answer to everything in life, but I would much rather get rich so I can actually spend money on me and my family's health, actually just spend time with friends and family, so I can buy the healthiest foods, maybe go on vacation, stuff like that, not so I can buy some expensive Lambo to impress my fake friends when I drive through Miami. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Epictetus. Another downside of all these material possessions is all the problems that they actually bring. You might not think about it, but like Tyler Durden says in Fight Club, the things you own end up owning you. The more things you own, the more stressed out you become, because you gotta manage them, you gotta make sure that nobody steals them, or anything like that. Just think about if you got this giant ass house, you got 5-10 cars, something like that, you got expensive art, you got a watch collection, you got a freaking safe with gold bars and whatnot, all these valuable material things, before you know it, they are making all your decisions for you. You might think, oh, do I want to go on vacation with my family? Yeah, that sounds great, but in the back of your mind, you always got that, well, I should probably up my security on the house, and what if somebody breaks in while I'm gone and all that stuff. And before you know it, you're not going on vacation. These things literally end up owning you, and that's just one example. That's just a million different ways that the things you own actually start dictating your life, making your choices for you. Biggie was right in his song More Money, More Problems.
The more money you make, the more problems you get. And jealousy and envy is just something that comes with the territory, man. A lot of people, it's just negative energy, like my man Puff say.
Here's just a quick analogy again. It's like you're playing that video game, you got a lot of valuable stuff on you. That actually makes you play, a certain type of way, you take less risks, you just play a more boring game because you don't want to die, because what if you lose all these valuable possessions that you got? And then when you finally end up dying, because that's just how it goes in video games, you feel like a giant weight has been lifted off your shoulder, because you don't have to worry about all these things that you had, and you realize, oh, okay, it wasn't even that bad, and now you can actually go out, play the game, and actually take risk, do fun stuff like that. Probably not the perfect analogy, but like I hope you get what I'm saying. Like you can have material possessions in life, but just don't put so much value on them that they end up, making your choices for you. Marcus Aurelius also just talks about in his book, you can read how all the things that we feel like we own, we only really borrowing from the world, because obviously, we're not gonna live forever, and in the end, it's the universe that makes all these choices and whatever. So there's no reason to be unhappy or sad when you lose something, because that's just the way the world goes. That's the whole stoic belief, just accepting things as they are, not trying to become emotional about it. We suffer more in our imagination than in reality. Seneca. I think this is another thing that we can learn from the Stoics, just staying present. We're all so caught up in the future, what if this happens, what about this, and oh, in 3 days I got this, and I gotta think about this, and we're just always focused on the future or on the past, and never actually just being in the moment and just staying present. We worry about all these things that 99% of the time are never gonna happen, which obviously is why Seneca said that quote, and just always focused on the future, on the past, so we just end up missing the present moment. And really, like, another reason why this is just such a waste of time and waste of like brain power, energy, whatever you want to say, is that 99% of the things in the world you can't control. Like if you're stuck in traffic, there's no reason to sit there and curse about it and get mad at the person in front of you, and go to all these lower vibrational frequencies. I know that sounds crazy, but literally, like, there's nothing you can do about it, so just accept it. Like, if it's raining, okay, that's just how it is. There's no reason to get mad about it or feel like, oh, the world is such a bad place, why is it raining, I hate it, all this stuff. The Stoics really knew the importance of being in the present moment and just accepting things as they are. And it's one thing to just say that, but how do we actually do it? By slowing down. I just read a book called Stolen Focus. Great book actually, about why we literally can't focus, and it's just life just keeps going faster and faster and faster. We're going from one form of dopamine to another, scrolling TikTok to watching Netflix. Even when we're on the toilet, we're sitting with our phones. In the car, we're listening to music or whatever. There's never a moment where we just sit with our thoughts and actually just let our brains kind of relax and just sort everything out. So we just become stressed out, we become anxious, we worry about the future, think about all this that happened in the past, it's so embarrassing and whatnot. It just keeps going faster and faster and faster. Nobody can just sit, eat their food with their family, everybody's on their phone. You can't watch a movie without scrolling TikTok, you can't stand at a bus stop without checking the news or whatever. Right when you wake up, you go on your phone, check, oh, what happened to the world, did I get some new likes on my Instagram post? We're just constantly flooding our brain with dopamine, and it's just getting faster and faster and faster, which just makes it exponentially harder to just stay in the present moment. So what you want to do is just reject that as much as possible. Be conscious about it. When you're standing at the bus stop, try to just stand there, look at the trees, whatever, look at the cars, let your brain do its natural thing, wake up, don't immediately grab your phone, go out, get some morning sunlight, do whatever, try to go for a walk without your phone, eat without watching YouTube or scrolling TikTok, try to do these slower things, reading books, stuff like that. Meditating is how you really become more present and start to really become more conscious about these things. And yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, all that stuff. If you have any questions or suggestions, anything like that, leave it in the comments. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I guess I'll see you in the next one.